I have been very clear, and I will continue to be very clear. If you want to provide federal resources and federal supports, things like FBI and ATF, if you want to make sure that we're getting these ghost guns out of our neighborhoods and out of our streets, if you want to stop cutting funding like the administration has done to Maryland, if you want to stop cutting our funding like the $30 million in violence prevention that you have cut from our state, I would love to have a very serious conversation with you about that. But if you are trying to have a conversation about activating our National Guard inside of our cities, then miss me with it.
What a week. Welcome back to the In Good Faith podcast, where I try to make sense of the world and talk to people that are out there that are trying to understand it, that are important, that are influential. And for today's episode, I spoke with Governor Wes Moore. Right? And Governor Moore is a former U.S. Army officer who served in Afghanistan, and he was awarded the Bronze Star for his service in the 82nd Airborne. He's the first Black governor of Maryland. And before politics, Moore was a best-selling author, and now he's running for re-election. And today, even though this was recorded on Friday, we talked about political violence and how to end it, gun violence, whether or not he's running for president, and if he'll make me FBI director, and Trump's threats to him. And while this is definitely one of our quicker episodes, I think you're going to love it. So hey, buckle up, hit that like button, or give this 5 stars, and get ready for an In Good Faith conversation with Governor Wes Moore. Governor, thank you so much for joining me. I mean, we're going to start off pretty heavy, right? 3 days ago, we saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk. 3 months ago, we saw a Minnesota state representative and her husband assassinated, another representative and his wife there shot in their home. Before that, you had Governor Shapiro's home being set on fire when he was there with his family. And of course, Trump was shot. You have the Whitmer kidnapping plot. The Capitol was stormed. I mean, when does it stop? How does it stop? Can it stop?
I mean, this is a difficult and a complex time, because we're talking about people who, in the case of, whether it's, Josh or Gretchen or our friends in Minnesota or the president for that matter, like, elected officials who, and this is the thing, what I think is really important for people to remember is that you can vehemently disagree with somebody. Like I vehemently disagree with so much of what came out of Charlie Kirk's mouth. I think that a lot of what Charlie Kirk said was misinformed. It was ignorant. It was bitter, and he never should have been murdered for it. His kids should not have to now grow up without their father because of it. His wife should not have to be a widow because of it. And I say this as somebody who, I watched my father die in front of me when I was 3 years old, and it's never something that I'm ever going to recover from. I had to watch my mother then instantaneously and unexpectedly become a widow with 3 kids that she was going to raise on her own. And I have seen that is never something that she has been able to recover from. So my heart really does go out to his family and his kids, because I can disagree deeply with the words that he said, or disagree of the value that his comments added to a public discourse, and still say that I still wish he was here, that we could actually have that debate.
I mean, when we are in this time, in this world where it does feel like you and other top prominent Democrats are saying very similar things about this. And, on Twitter, you tweeted kind of a more condensed version of this, saying you condemn in the strongest possible terms the attack on Charlie Kirk this afternoon at Utah Valley University. As I've said in the past, and as I will continue to say, political violence is never acceptable, ever. The First Lady and I are praying for him and his family at the first time. How do you then respond to others? One of the top replies to that is it's a yellow checkmark account saying, this is the world that you have built, right? A lot of what we're seeing right now is this move to blame everyone on the left, or political or politicians on the left. What's your response and reaction to that?
Well, I think that there has to be a measure of collective responsibility that all of us in society have to take on it. That for every one of us, that there are frankly both elected officials that have said things that should have never been said, or try to introduce misinformation and introduce violent rhetoric to say that we are at war with one another. And I tell people, like, I've been to war. I know what war looks like. I fought with the 82nd Airborne Division in Afghanistan. I have seen the complications and the difficulties and the brutality of war. We're not at war here. I'm not at war with any Marylander. I'm not at war with any American, and I will never be at war with any Marylander or any American. We're not enemies. We can have different political views, but you're not my enemy. You're not my moral and my mortal opponent. And I do think all of us do have a responsibility. And I frankly, I think that anyone who is going to use this moment to blame it on a party or on a group, I think is in many ways is actually just as dangerous. We all have a role to play in how we got here. We all have a role to play in how we get out of it. And I think that using this moment to turn into a finger pointing blame game is actually falling right into the hands of those who wish for nothing else than the complete implosion of this country. Because frankly, the thing I worry most about the future of this country is not China. It's not Russia. It's not nuclear proliferation. It's none of those things, because I think those are all things that we can navigate. The biggest fear that I have about the future of this country is actually, will we be able to sustain a pretty remarkable experiment or not? And will this country find itself to be its greatest opponent and the only global opponent that we were not able to defeat?
It does feel like if the goal was to set off a spark so that we would destroy ourselves, that is the main thing that is potentially being accomplished of what we saw over the past few days. And while we do have some people out there saying, be peaceful, the word that you used, that you said that others are saying, I mean, we've seen a lot of big personalities saying war. We had the president saying that this is about radical left lunatics. And actually this morning, regarding the idea of radical left or radical right, I wanted to play a clip and get your reaction to this.
Radicals on the right as well. We have radicals on the left. People are watching all of these videos and cheering. Some people are cheering that Charlie was killed. How do we fix this country? How do we come back together?
I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. They don't want to see crime.
Worried about the border.
They're saying, we don't want these people coming in. We don't want you burning our shopping centers. We don't want you shooting our people in the middle of the street. The radicals on the left are the problem. And they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy. Although they want men and women sports, they want transgender for everyone. They want open borders.
So I think that was said about maybe 45 minutes ago from when we started talking. And I didn't know if you had thoughts and reactions since we're on this topic. And, it does appear that he's contrasting the two.
Yeah. I did not hear that. But it's really unfortunate because I wasn't expecting anything better. And it's really heartbreaking because what this country needs right now is we need a leader. We need a leader who actually has the innate moral capacity to be able to bring us together and remind us of how powerful we are when we actually can stand united and heal. And we need that now as much as ever before. And truthfully, and I would say this to the president and anyone else, is that when you think about the leaders who are remembered, they were the leaders who understood that in these moments of real tension that this country has had, because the history of this country is deeply uneven, and it's brutal. And the only thing that has let us out when we have these real moments of crisis and internal friction has been God's grace, and it's been moral leadership, right? God's grace and moral leadership have been the only two things that have ever let us out of really complex situation in our country. And I say this as someone who is the governor of the northernmost southern state in this country. The governor of a state where the Mason-Dixon line literally runs through the state of Maryland, a state where, my flag, our state flag, is literally a combination of the Confederate and a Union flag together. So this country has seen times where we have had deep divides, and existential questions that this country needed to answer. And God's grace and moral leadership has been able to navigate us through. And I just think that what the president has said, and frankly, consistently has said, and this is why this kind of tracks what he said this morning, is we need leadership, Mr. President. And we need leadership who is not using this for a political advantage, who is helping to calm the nerves of people, who's helping to bring a measure of moral clarity to people, who's able to help people understand that it is not inevitable that we're going to be better because of this, but it is possible. And we're going to need for him and for all of us to be better, if that is at all going to be the path that we are going to take. And so I think the thing that we don't need right now is the blame game and frankly, the misinformation that continues to get spewed from the White House on this. I think we need leadership. And I would really hope that this administration and the president understands that your words matter. And the leadership that you show in this moment is going to help to determine what type of country are we hoping to be.
So in addition then to leadership and a goal of uniting and everyone's saying lower the temperature, whether it be what we saw with Kirk, whether it be the school shooting that we saw happen the same day, what also helps us get out of it? Is it, I mean, there was a bit of a shouting match on the House floor this week of, we'll pass gun laws. Are gun laws the way out of this? Are there other methods? What are your thoughts there?
Well, no, and I think it really has to be a combination. We have to be able to address gun violence, because what is the thread that we continue to see through all of this? Whether you're talking about slain and assassinations of lawmakers in Minnesota, whether you're talking about assassinations of activists and political commentary, whether it's going after children, either in homes of worship or in their schools. What is the thread between all that? It's not geography, it's not socioeconomic groups, it's not family backgrounds, it's gun violence. That's the thread, and it's the only thread. And so when we think about it from that way, and so again, I think that laws alone are going to change it? No, there is no one single piece of legislation that we're going to pass that's like, okay, great, we have fixed it because we have passed Senate Bill 458, right? There is nothing like that we are going to do. We have to be able to get at root causes with a measure of humanity and with a measure of insistence that we as a society can actually heal, get to know each other, become a society that serves. I spent my 9/11 in the morning. I did a 9/11 remembrance workout with our students at Annapolis High School, remembering 9/11 and what happened 24 years ago. And then I went from there to College Park to bring in our next class, our third class of service year option students, where Maryland became the first state in the country that now gives an option for high school graduates to have a year of paid service to the state of Maryland, because I believe deeply that service will save us. So all those things are going to matter. I also, though, know this, as Dr. King said, that laws won't change the heart, but laws can protect me from the heartless. And so we need to have laws that are actually going to make sure that we're addressing the issue of gun violence, making sure there is real accountability, and making sure we have a better understanding of why do we need, if a person has a history of a mental illness and a history of violence, they should not be able to purchase a firearm. And that should not be a controversial thought. That a person should not be able to walk into a nursery with a firearm, and that should not be a controversial thought. And so we need to be honest about that and also come up with laws that just make sense for our society.
So on that front, I mean, what would you say that you feel like you've done for your state, the state of gun violence, whether it be in Greater Maryland or specifically with Baltimore? A lot of people will start pointing fingers there. What would you say there?
Yeah, well, I'd say that when we first came on board, I was clear that public safety was going to be our number one priority. And, the year before I became the governor, Baltimore was averaging about a homicide a day. That the 8 years before I became the governor under my Republican predecessor, that the non-fatal shooting rate in the state of Maryland had doubled. The homicide rate had nearly doubled all across the state, and we had a violence crisis. And I said, I will not be a governor that is just going to attend funerals and offer thoughts and prayers and shake my hand in anger. That we were going to do the things that we needed to do, which were making historic investments in local law enforcement. It means making historic investments in technology and predictive analytics and saying if someone commits a violent crime, particularly with a firearm, I want him in handcuffs in 24 hours. It's saying that we're going to work with our community groups and our community violence intervention groups and work and support the great work that the mayor was doing in Baltimore, but had no support in order to make happen, and support the work of our county executives all across the state. Make Maryland one of the only states in the country that now actually helps to fund our U.S. attorney out of balance sheet, so we can take some of these crimes as federal crimes. And yes, I signed legislation, common sense gun legislation, that said things like, if a person, that a person should not be able to bring a firearm in an amusement park, and saying that if a person has a history of mental illness and a history of violence, that no, they should not be able to purchase a firearm, right? And what have been the results? That we have now seen that Maryland has had amongst the fastest drops in violent crime anywhere in the United States of America in 2.5 years, that the last time the homicide rate was this low in Baltimore City, I wasn't born yet. That we've been able to make literally the kind of changes that we promised and we were hoping for. But we were able to do it because we were able to work together. We were able to do it because we were able to use common sense and common sense laws and policies. And we're able to do it because we brought in clergy and community groups and educators and help people who are returning from incarceration, and really bringing everybody into this conversation in a way that I think has driven real results.
Would you say that's the thing you're most proud about, or it's like top five? Because you just announced that you're running for re-election in 2026. So whether it's that or, why, I guess maybe the better question is, why should Marylanders get you back in for a second term?
Yeah, well, because I think we've had not just momentum, we've shown that there is a better way from the way we were existing before. And that means where Maryland was ranked 43rd in the country in unemployment. And now for a year and a half, we've had amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country, because we've been able to get people back into the workforce, that we've been able to make and stop these artificial barriers, where I signed the largest mass pardon in the history of the United States of America, where I pardoned over 175,000 misdemeanor cannabis convictions. Because I thought it was ridiculous that we now have a legal market in the state of Maryland, and I have people who still could not get a barber's license because of a cannabis convictions of the 1990s, right? So we were able to actually, quadruple the amount of apprentices and trade programs and platforms that we have in the state of Maryland, because, while we have some of the best four-year colleges in America, I'm very clear that not every student needs to attend one of them in order to be economically successful, that we've been able to have a population growth, that we've been able to watch our GDP growth, that we've stopped the out-of-control spending that was taking place in the state of Maryland before we showed up. So we don't just have a track record to show that there is a better way. I also think that if you're looking at the chaos that's coming from Washington, where the president of the United States has now fired over 12,000 Marylanders, federal workers, who are now unemployed because of Donald Trump, who we're watching a federal government that is kicking people off of healthcare, a federal government that has now taken $250 million from rural hospitals in the state of Maryland, that we in Maryland are showing that there is a better way to take care of our people, and that despite all those things, we're still making historic investments in rural healthcare. We still have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country. We are still creating pathways to address the issue of child poverty. We are making sure we're protecting our people. And so I'm excited about the momentum that the state has. And I'm really excited about what we're going to be able to get done over these next 4 years.
Well, on the note of what you can get done, and on the note of the chaos and the moves that we've been seeing, I guess I'll just ask you directly. Will you redraw your congressional districts in response to Missouri doing the same?
Yeah, I think Maryland has to keep all options on the table on this, because I'm going to tell you why. So one, on surface, I am actually against gerrymandering, and I think that this idea that you can have politicians who they can choose their people, I think is just a wild idea to me. because less than 10% of all congressional seats around the country are actually competitive. But you know what I know is even a wilder idea? The president of the United States calling and picking which states should, quote unquote, rethink if they have fair maps or not. Because we've seen this before. He did this in Georgia with the election officials, where he was calling up election officials and saying, you know, hey, I need X amount of new votes. Find me votes. And now we're seeing the same thing on the congressional side, where it's like, find me congressional seats. And the reason is because it's a really difficult message he's going to have to make to the American people when he says, hey, in the midterm elections, saying, hey, by the way, I've kicked millions of you off of healthcare. The cost of everything has gone up. We just added trillions of dollars to the national debt. You should vote for our party. He knows that's an impossible message. So what do? You cheat and you change the rules. And frankly, it tracks with what we have seen throughout his life. And so I think in a situation like this, if we are going to have certain states saying, do we have fair maps? Then I think then the state of Maryland should say, we might want to ask that same question too. And I think all options should be on the table as we are watching this take place. I wish Congress would do their job and pass legislation forbidding it. I wish Congress would pass legislation but they're not going to. So therefore, let the states lead them.
Is it something in Maryland that you'd be able to move on very quick? Because I think it feels like there's a bit of a timing game playing out to a certain degree.
There is. And I know Maryland, just like every state has different laws and different dynamics. You know, in the state of Maryland, it's something that the state legislature would have to be able to vote on, and the state legislature would have to, would have to enact. And so I've been working with members of our state legislature, and have been very clear that I am eager to support any movements that the state legislature might do to make sure that all options are on the table about how Maryland is going to move and respond in this moment.
And now, Governor Moore, you do say that you're not running for president in 2028, and you know, a lot of people, they say that, and then they say, well, I think the country needs me. Are you definitely not running for president in 2028?
I'm not running for president, and you know, and here's the thing.
I was gonna ask you if I could head the FBI, but okay, keep going. I thought this was my chance.
If you run, just make me the ambassador to Jamaica.
No, no, but you're not.
Here's the thing, and I tell people, and listen, I love the fact that when people are saying, "Are you ruling it out?" I was like, guys, I've never ruled it in. I've never ever once said that I'm even interested in that job. And I appreciate the fact that people are looking at what we're doing in Maryland and are excited about it, because what's happening in Maryland is really exciting. And I do think we are setting a standard for the country about how are we thinking about everything from bringing down violent crime to increasing employment to making sure that we're leaving no one behind. And so I do appreciate that people are noticing what's happening. But I have to be honest with you. Like, I remember when one of my mentors was Elijah Cummings, the famous congressman from Baltimore. And I love that man. And I remember after he passed, there were people who came up to me, and to include members of his family, and who were like, would you consider running for his seat? And I love Elijah Cummings. And I told him, and I thought about it, and I prayed on it, and I was like, that's not what I want to do. And there was nothing that anyone could have told me to make me do that, because I was like, it's not my skill set. It's not something I'm interested in. I remember when I made the decision to run for governor, I had plenty of people who were telling me, don't do this. You can't win. Like, you're running against statewide elected officials. You're running against 2 Obama cabinet secretaries. You're running against the former head of the Democratic Party, the former head of the DNC. And they're like, and then you have no political experience, no political background, don't come from a political family, and you want to run for governor? And people told me, do not run. Like, we love you. Don't do this. This is going to end badly. And there is nothing anyone could have told me to make me not run for governor. And so my only point is this, I love my job, and I love my work, and I love what we're doing in the state of Maryland. And there was nothing that anybody could have told me to not run for governor. And I know that I'm comfortable with where I am. And I'm very comfortable with the fact that I really believe that Maryland is going to have, this is going to be Maryland's decade. And I'm excited to help see that through.
So since you're definitely not doing it, wink, wink. No, since you're definitely not doing it, I'll ask you an unorthodox question for a politician in this spot. Is there anyone that you see right now leading the party more than others in this this road to 2028? Obviously, you have some people out there louder and bigger and more at the forefront than others. Right now, you have Newsom constantly all over the place, usually facing off with the president. Every single day. I mean, who is there? Someone else right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually I love a lot of things that a lot of our folks are doing. I love the stuff that JB is doing and how he's pushing and fighting, fighting for his people. I think that I love the work that Andy Bashir is doing. I like the work that a lot of the governors are doing. Here's the thing that I know. When I think about what we need in 2028 and what 2028 is going to look like. I'm going to be looking a lot at what people did in 2025, right? Like, did you take this moment seriously? When we had an all-out assault on us, and this is the thing that gets me when people tell me, like, well, hey, don't poke the bear, and, don't, be careful on what you say. It's like, are you not paying attention to what he's already doing to us? Are you not paying attention to the fact that Donald Trump has denied federal aid and federal disaster relief to our people in Western Maryland, despite having historic floods, and they're about to go through a very brutal winter. And the federal government has given them nothing to prepare for that. People will lose their lives this winter because the federal government has left them on their own. Are you not paying attention to the fact that we've had federal buildings that were set to come to the state of Maryland, like the FBI building, which is responsible for over $4 billion of economic activity, over 7,000 new jobs that were coming to the state of Maryland. And Donald Trump, in a press conference, said, yeah, I don't want the FBI building to go to Maryland because it is a liberal state. Have you thought about a president of the United States who is trying to take away bridge funding, 100% cost share that we have from the Congress, from Republican and Democratic members of Congress, and the president of the United States decides to say in a midnight tweet that, oh, Westmore, I gave Westmore all this money for that bridge. You didn't give us anything, Mr. President. Like, are people not paying attention to the assault that's going on right now? And so my point is this, if you want any of us to take you seriously in 2028, I want to see, do you understand what's going on in 2025? Because if you don't, frankly, it's disqualifiable for me.
And I mean, you mentioned the FBI there. I mean, I'd really love to know your thoughts on, like, when you hear the allegations that FBI leaders are being fired over political loyalty tests, like who you voted for, or like what are your views on DEI? I mean, what goes through your mind as both a public servant and a veteran?
I mean, honestly, it's blasphemous. And I don't care if we're talking about the FBI or any of these agencies, because and you're right. And I think about it from my perspective as a veteran and how I've tried to lead in Maryland, where I think to myself, I was like, a question I've never once asked my soldiers when I was leading soldiers in combat? I never once asked my soldiers, what's your political party? I never once asked them, how did you vote in the last election? Because it didn't matter. We had one goal, one mission. And I think there is an absolute danger where we know what it looks like to have a politicized FBI. We saw that with J. Edgar Hoover and COINTELPRO, right? We saw what that looked like when we had agencies that were being used for political targeting and not actually going after criminals and not actually making people safe. And those are taxpayer dollars that was paying for that. And so I do think there is a danger that we need to be cognizant of. And I do think that if this is happening, and this is happening from a political perspective, it makes it that much more offensive, particularly as people who, again, as myself as a veteran, who never came up that way and was never trained that way. And frankly, as governor, I haven't led that way, where I haven't given a damn where the idea came from. Just tell me, is it a good idea? Then let's do it. Let's rock. And I think we have to be able to, from a federal level, have the same level of confidence in our federal leaders as well.
When you're talking about the military, I mean, what's your, I guess, reaction, or where are you at right now regarding, Trump's threatened to deploy the military to Maryland and Baltimore specifically? And I mean, it does seem like there's some movement there, right? It seems like he's backing down with Chicago. He's talking about Memphis and New Orleans instead.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think he's backing down with Baltimore, or where's that at?
Well, yeah, I think that listen, there's one thing I think we learned in the military is that everybody's a target. So make yourself a hard target. And I think they have learned Baltimore and Maryland were hard targets. We're not easy targets. And we're not easy targets both because I know the law, both because as governor of this state, I know that I take the responsibility of not just being the state's governor seriously, I take the responsibility of being the state's commander in chief of our National Guard and our Air Guard very seriously. I think they know that my background is very clear. I'm a soldier and I'm standing guard. And I'm going to make sure that we are not politicized and that our people are brave men and women who have raised their hands to serve, raise their hands to leave their family and lose their lives if necessary on behalf of the state and on behalf of this country. Know that the orders that they are getting are not politicized. And I would never, ever authorize them to be used for something that was performative, ever. And I think that they've also learned, and we've seen in Washington, D.C., when people are saying, well, that they've made Washington, D.C. safe. Let's be clear. The crime rate in Washington, D.C., the violent crime rate in Washington, D.C. has fallen since they've activated the National Guard. Do you know where else it's fallen? Baltimore. And in fact, it's fallen in Baltimore at around the same clip that it's fallen in Washington, D.C. And we did not have to activate the National Guard in order to get those numbers. And the National Guard that they have activated in Washington, D.C., I find it so deeply offensive that if they know what the National Guard is doing, they're raking mulch. They're picking up trash. They are, they're not seizing illegal guns. They're not conducting arrests of criminals. They're not going out there and doing municipal policing because that's not something the National Guard is functionally trained for. So they have them out there painting fences. It is so deeply offensive what they are doing to these National Guardsmen and the people who they're asking to leave their families, the people who they're asking to miss the first days of school for their kids, and they're doing it for what? And so I have been very clear, and I will continue to be very clear. If you want to provide federal resources and federal supports, things like FBI and ATF, if you want to make sure that we're getting these ghost guns out of our neighborhoods and out of our streets, if you want to stop cutting funding like the administration has done to Maryland, if you want to stop cutting our funding like the $30 million in violence prevention that you have cut from our state, I would love to have a very serious conversation with you about that. But if you are trying to have a conversation about activating our National Guard inside of our cities, then miss me with it. And the answer is going to be no.
Governor Westmore, thank you so much for the time.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
And to you, dear listener, thank you for watching or listening to today's podcast. If you haven't already, follow us on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Also, give it 5 stars on Spotify and Apple, or give it a like on YouTube. And of course, leave a comment on what you agreed with, disagreed with, or who you'd like to see next as a guest. Thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here soon.